right, hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition. This is an Inside Sports production of Football Talk, in case you didn't know by that fantastic opening there. And, regardless of what the opening says, Chris Lardieri is no longer a special guest. He is actually a member of the team here. We'll be doing this show every single week, all the way through football season, through to 2013, through to the Super Bowl. He's going to be here with me. Chris Lardieri of footballnation.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at Chris L Sports. So without further ado, everybody, here is the main man, Chris Lardieri. Chris, what's happening?
Not much, Charles. Thank you for another fantastic introduction. I'm just glad football's here, and I'm more than happy to talk about it every week with you on your great show.
Yeah, and that shows that you're a real football fan, because no matter what happened to your Giants last night, you're still happy that football is here.
Absolutely, and the way I look at it, the way the Giants have had their last two Super Bowl runs, I'd worry if it was December. Hopefully they'll knock off all the cobwebs and stop reading all the great headlines about themselves and realize the NFC East is going to be a dogfight this year.
Absolutely, but this is going to be we did preview the NFC last week. We're going to preview the AFC this week, and only fitting that we pay tribute to one of the truly iconic owners in sports who just passed away. That's Art Modell, 87 years old, owner of the Cleveland Browns from 1961 to 1995, before he yanked them from the city, took them to Baltimore, where they became the Ravens. Owned them from 96 to 2004. So, loved / hated in Cleveland, but you can't deny the man's place in NFL history, though.
Absolutely not. And like you said, I know he was hated in Cleveland, but if you were to look at the old Municipal Stadium, could you blame him for wanting to leave for greener pastures? The thing a lot of people won't recognize, and Charles, you and I are kind of remember this from the days of the 70s and 80s NFL when it really started to explode. Mm-hmm. He was one of the stalwart owners up there with the Maras in New York, the Rooneys in Pittsburgh, etc. And what people don't realize, he's a former TV producer, and he and Pete Rozelle essentially made the NFL into the television league that it is today, just a multi-billion-dollar entity unto itself. And he was also instrumental in getting Monday Night Football on the air on ABC in 1970, where it just became a household item in American television watchers. And, now we have Sunday Night Football. That's kind of been the de facto show to watch regarding football. But essentially there would be none of this were it not for Modell, Pete Rozelle, and some of the powers that be at ABC. So just a couple little tidbits I read about today in his obituary that people need to remember about this man.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the other thing. We look at the iconic owners. I mean, Art Modell is one of them. Everybody talks about, of course, Al Davis. And some of the other great owners, Mara, the Rooneys in Pittsburgh. But the NFL, when you talk about it, it really didn't come into its own. Unlike the other sports where you can trace it back to the 20s, the 30s, or 1918, I think, when the Cubs won the World Series or something like that. But, the NFL really didn't become what it is until about 1970. That's when things started. But all the other sports, Stanley Cups back to the 20s, NBA championships for a long time. But the NFL, it was all sectional. And it wasn't until the 70s, well, you could say the 60s, late 60s, when they really started putting everything together to make it one league.
Absolutely. And another thing he was instrumental in was the merging of the AFL and the NFL. And had that not happened, one of those leagues would have likely failed, and it could have possibly been, hypothetically, just a fringe sport. It would have been eclipsed by baseball. So, and mind you, as you said, I'm a Giants fan. I witnessed in person his Ravens beat my Giants in the Super Bowl back in '01. So yeah. For me to say nice things about the man says a lot about him. But, he suffered for a long time in Cleveland. The fumble, I'll mention his name even though I don't want to do him any more harm. Ernest Biner against the Broncos, losing a couple years later. It's kind of interesting. He finally won his title once he left Cleveland. But all in all, a legend in the NFL.
Yeah, most definitely. So Art Modell, regardless, and even I think a lot of the old schoolers in Cleveland, they know it was just maybe a bitter divorce, but most of the memories are fond. Jim Brown and everything else that went on there in Cleveland, but just reaches a point where they just had to go their separate ways. So Art Modell, you will be missed by many, but you know what? It's time for present day right now, so let's get into this AFC breakdown. Let's go ahead and preview it. What do you say, Mr. Lardy? Are you ready to get down to this?
Do it.
All right. Perfect. Let's go ahead and start in the South. Let's start with the AFC South. We've got AFC South, the Texans, Arian Foster going to be back. Andre Johnson, Matt Schaub back at QB. They won the division last year at 10-6. Titans with Chris Johnson nipping at their heels at 9-7. Mojo D had a little bit of a holdout there. Maurice Jones-Drew for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then, of course, the big news is the Colts in that division drafting Andrew Luck. He and, of course, Robert Griffin III were the big draft picks this year, the two prizes.
Yeah, definitely. And at the end of the day, it's going to be the Texans and everyone else, and this is their division to lose. Even if hypothetically Schaub were to get hurt again this year, they kind of thrust T.J. Yates into the fire last year, where he almost beat the Ravens into the playoffs. So, in the worst case scenario, at least they have a serviceable backup, and the running game, like you said, led by Foster. Mm-hmm. They've even got an excellent backup in Ben Tate. There were some key departures on the defense, Mario Williams, D'Amico Ryans, but they just seem to retool and reload, and under Wade Phillips in that 3-4. I mean, I really don't see anyone in that division contending with them. I know the Titans had a nice year last year. Now that Locker's been the starter, we'll see. It's going to be sink or swim for him, but I really don't think they're going to put up too much of a fight versus the Texans. Jacksonville, just like you said, with MJD holding out and Gabbert kind of coming into his own this year. We'll see how he performs, but really not a heck of a lot down there in terms of weapons. Just a very young team, new coach in Mike Mularkey, but another turnaround team. And with the Colts, I mean, it'll be interesting to watch, just to see how Luck develops, kind of like, Peyton Manning the second, as it were. But, if they win 4 or 5 games, it'd probably be a successful year for them. So really it's one contender and a bunch of pretenders in that division.
Exactly, and, he's going to have I believe they open up in Chicago, the Colts do. Okay, so that'll be a pretty good test for him, going to one of the storied franchises in Soldier Field and see what he can do there, Andrew Luck. But seems like a good kid. I wish him all the best, but we'll see what happens this year.
I agree.
All right, well, let's go ahead and move on. I think I'll agree with you as far as the Texans taking that division. The Titans, I just think, a few too many holes, and I'm not – Chris Johnson is a great runner, but I'm just not completely sold on, and there's something – I think there's an element in great running backs, and I'm not sure that he truly has that, though he had the one great season. Then, the holdout, and we saw how long it took him to get going. That's one thing I think which may hurt the Jaguars this year, is Mojo D may take until the 3rd or 4th week to really get going, get up to that NFL speed like he needs to with that lengthy holdout.
Yeah, there's going to be some rust on those wheels for sure.
Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead to the AFC North. The Baltimore Ravens. Ray Lewis and his fierce defense, they actually tied the Steelers at 12-4, but they beat the Steelers both games. So they did take the division. They got home field advantage, though it turned into a little bit of a disaster there, courtesy of Lee Evans and Billy Cundiff against the Patriots. And then T. Sizzle, who had one of the most famous, oh my God, sideline little sound bites ever, as Cundiff's field goal chip shot goes sailing wide a la Scott Norwood. But, yeah, the Ravens, the Steelers, both finished 12-4. Steelers now have a new offensive coordinator. What do you see there? This may be a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be those two teams to lose. I know the Ravens are kind of the perennial favorite right now. The thing for me, I think they're really going to miss Suggs on defense. Guy's a monster rushing the passer. Not a lot of people are talking about that. And, Ray Lewis is still great, but he's a year older. Ed Reed anchors a secondary. What worries me ultimately is, does Flacco have enough weapons to throw to? I mean, Ray Rice is a great running back. He's going to continue to get his yards and his TDs, but ultimately this is a make-or-break year for Flacco. The Steelers, you know what? A lot of people are down on them this year. They've had a lot of injuries, especially on the O-line. the Castros gotten hurt. They kind of dodged a bullet with that. They thought it'd be more serious, their first-round pick. Can you keep Roethlisberger upright? And then you've got issues at running back. Will Mendenhall be back healthy in time to make a significant impact this year? But I tell you, when everyone gets down on the Steelers, they seem to turn it around. And were it not for another Tim Tebow miracle last year, who's to say they couldn't have gone deeper into the playoffs and maybe faced off with New England? So if I were to lean one, I'd say the Steelers right now. But it could go either way. I think they're still the cream of the crop in the North.
Yeah, I think so. And when I look at that, and there's also, I get some reports out of Pittsburgh. I got some connections back there still. And there's kind of talk. I'm sorry?
I said, so I've heard.
Yeah. So there's kind of talk around there. They kind of need to get back to, everyone's going to the, the spread offense, the 5 wideouts and everything. But maybe they need to get back to just Steeler football. And one of the guys who can do that is Isaac Redman, who's going to be, he's going to be carrying the load while Mendenhall is on the mend in Hall. So I liked Redman what I saw from him last year, though. He did have a little bit of a case of fumbleitis. But if he can cure that, Ike Redman is going to be a solid running back in the NFL, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And you know what? In the NFL, you need 2 good running backs. You need at least a solid backup, because you never know if your number one's going to get hurt or what can come up. So even just a good change of pace back. So I think it's a good problem as we get to the middle of the season, where you can see both guys kind of spelling each other. And now that Mike Wallace is back, we'll see. Then we've got Brown on the other side. They could still throw the ball. And like you said, with Haley, the new OC there, he's not going to have to alienate his players as he was the head coach with Kansas City. I think he'll get back to his roots of calling plays. I mean, he did a great job in Arizona, got his team to the Super Bowl with Kurt Warner years ago. So let's see what he can do. I'm a little more bullish on the Steelers than most.
Yeah, I think I like the Steelers to take this division. Let's talk about, the bottom 2 there, the Bengals and the Browns. Bengals did they made the playoffs last year, 9-7, which is fantastic for the Bengals. Do we believe in Andy Dalton? And also, the Browns were 4-12 last year, but is Colt McCoy the guy? Is he going to be the long-term answer? What about those 2 franchises in the Battle of Ohio?
You know what? I want to hope the Bengals do well. I want them to turn the corner, and I think it's great. They've got Dalton and a phenomenal wide receiver in A.J. Green, but it just seems whenever the Bengals have one of those turnaround years, they come back to reality. They're going to have a more difficult schedule than they did last year, so I think they might come back to the pack a little. The Browns, just one of these teams you feel bad for. It seems like there's always a new quarterback coming in this year, Brandon Weeden, they drafted from Oklahoma State. So McCoy's no longer the flavor of the month. They got Trent Richardson at running back. He's already had some knee issues. So you just feel bad for Shermer there in Cleveland. Is it just yet another cycle of, well, we'll bring in a new coach and then maybe another quarterback down the road? No, it's just I wonder if Mike Holmgren knew what he was getting into. So I still see them being the cellar dwellers in the North.
All right, and then what about the Bengals? Do you think maybe can they sneak in, squeeze out another 9-7, maybe even go 10-6 season and see a little bit of postseason action there?
I don't think so, just because the schedule will be a little more difficult, and I think teams will kind of have Dalton figured out. With the lockout last year and all, it was almost like he came out of the blue, and teams really didn't know. But I mean, if you can shut down Green, kind of like the Texans did in the playoffs, you're going to suffocate that offense. So I think we'll see more of that. Could they pull an 8-8, maybe another 9-7? Possibly, but 9-7's no longer guaranteed you a playoff spot. It's some years it'll get you in, like at the AFC West last year. Some it won't. But I think I'm probably looking at an 8-8 team would be my guess.
All right, perfect. Perfect segue. You mentioned the AFC West. Let's go ahead and get on over to the AFC West, where, of course, Peyton Manning, longtime quarterback of the Colts, everyone knows unless they've been living in a cave. And from what I understand, even cavemen know about Peyton Manning. So Manning is there. The Broncos, you speak of 8-8 teams. The Broncos took the division at 8-8, even though the Chargers were 8-8 and the Raiders were 8-8. The Chiefs were 7-9. But, it's one of those where somebody's got to win all those tiebreakers, and that happened to be the Broncos. Even though they had a -81 in point differential on the season, the Broncos take it at 8-8. You got the Broncos, the Chargers, the Raiders, the Chiefs. This is the most parity you'll see in any division. 3 8-8s and a 7-9. Talk to me.
Perfect on any given Sunday, right, Charles? I think this year we'll actually see a team with a winning record win the West. We're not going to have a repeat of the NFC West of a few years ago. That being said, I know Denver's kind of the favorite pick of the quote-unquote experts now, even with Peyton Manning back. I'm not even so much concerned about Manning's health as I am their brutal schedule. They're one of the toughest schedules in football, and right out of the gate, you've got Pittsburgh coming to town on this Sunday night.
Oh, isn't that going to be a beauty?
No. So, they're going to want revenge. They're going to want revenge after the great Tebow debacle. So, I think they'll be a good team. But you know what? In this division this year, the Raiders, Chargers, and Chiefs are all improved. And who's to say? Denver may go 9-7. It may not even win them the division or get them a wild card. So I think it's going to be a tough division from top to bottom. And you know how it works out. These teams just slug it out. San Diego went into Kansas City last year, setting up for a field goal. They fumble and they blow a game. So there's always just a lot of back and forth and hard to predict what can happen any given week when they have those rivalries.
Well, so I like the and plus when we look at the Raiders, the other thing was Carson Palmer, coming out of retirement, not really having a full, it took him a while to actually get going. Now Carson Palmer will have had a full training camp and everything to get going with the Raiders too. So as you talk about them getting better as well, and Rivers, the Chargers, it's hard to see. They should still. I still think the Chargers should be one of the better teams in this division. But the Chargers are going to have to be without Ryan Matthews, I think, for the first couple of games here. He got that collarbone in the preseason, so who knows how that's going to factor against them as time goes on there.
Yeah, exactly. And the big questions there are going to be: can Gates remain healthy? Can Meacham replace the loss of Vincent Jackson to free agency? Who's going to run the ball in Matthews' absence? And the Chargers are one of these teams that are a notorious slow starter, and they turn it on in the end, or it's too little, too late. I think ultimately for me, it's a make or break year for Norv Turner. I just I want to like the guy. He's a nice guy, but I just don't see him getting the job done there. Believe it or not, this is going to be one of my dark horse picks. I like the Kansas City Chiefs to take this division. Once they got rid of Haley and named Romeo Crennel the interim coach, the team kind of turned it around. They beat the Packers when they were undefeated. They went into Denver and beat them, albeit, it was against Tebow, not Peyton Manning.
Right.
But now that he's been promoted to full-time head coach, and you've got a couple key guys coming back from knee injuries, namely Eric Berry in the secondary and Jamal Charles running back, and they've now backed him up with Peyton Hillis, former Brown. I think this could be a turnaround year. I'm sure Matt Castle's going to be a little happier as he and Haley didn't get along. So that's kind of my dark horse pick. They got a solid defense. They got Dwayne Bowe back on offense. I think this could be a turnaround year for them.
Holy cow, that's coming out of the Chiefs. Going back to the days of yore. Len Dawson, Ed Podolak. Oh, they would be so happy with you right now.
Hank Stram is smiling down on Kansas City right now.
All right, well, the Chiefs to win the division. That's, I like that. And I believe it or not, I kind of am leaning towards thinking the Raiders might do something as well. Like we say, with one more, Palmer with a whole preseason, and then Al Davis no longer around to interfere. God rest his soul. But maybe the Raiders come through. I got to go with the Broncos. I think they can go 8-8 with with Tebow. I think with Peyton Manning, and I'm not a big Manning fan, but regular season he is good. So I look at the Broncos. I think they can go 10-6 this year. And I think the Broncos they're going to take this division with Manning at quarterback. I do like your pick on the Chiefs, but I got to go with Peyton Manning and the Broncos.
No, it's hard to not bet against Peyton, but I figured let me just thinking about it a little. Things kind of line up, and in the AFC West, it's always the teams you least expect that seem to win it. And I would pick the Raiders. My one concern there is how's their defense going to hold up. And will Darren McFadden stay healthy for an entire season? This team will always roll along and do well. And once he gets injured, it's like the wheels come off. They have no backup Michael Bush is gone. He's in Chicago now. So
Yeah.
what do? You key on the pass, and that doesn't bode well for Palmer.
Yeah, and you could say we just mentioned what you could do with San Diego. So what you got is 4 teams that are about ifs and buts. So I see the Broncos if Manning stays healthy, and if he gets on the same page with his receivers and gets that relationship that he had going with Marvin Harrison for many years, with Reggie Wayne, with Pierre Garçon, and all those other guys. I think Stokely is there now, and that's really kind of one of the only other guys that he's used to throwing to. But,
yeah,
there's also that. Is he going to have that same chemistry? And there's a lot of factors. I just go with the Broncos just because. That's all.
Oh, it's reasonable.
All right, so let's go ahead and slide on over to the AFC East, where the New England Patriots, they won the division last year, 13-3. We know about them going to the Super Bowl, once again favored, once again coming up on the short end. So here's what happened in this division in a nutshell. The Patriots got to the Super Bowl. The Jets got Tebow. The Bills got Mario Williams. And the Dolphins got on television for Hard Knocks.
It's a good summary.
Yeah, there we go. So let's go ahead and start those. The New England Patriots, you'd got to think with all the turmoil going on. I mean, the Jets and Tebow and Sanchez, which is a tempest in a teapot there, that whole situation. The Dolphins, Ryan Tannehill, rookie, is going to be starting now. Matt Moore started as a rookie last year. The Bills finished 6-10, but they showed some promise. But still, the Patriots still look to be the most solid team, I think, in this division.
Yeah, division's theirs to lose. They one of the easiest schedules this year in the NFL. They're going to win, even if they slip up and only go 11-5 or 12-4. They'll win handily. So I see no problems there. The great Belichick has retooled, brought in Brandon Lloyd, which is definitely an upgrade from some of the receivers they had last year opposite Wes Welker. You got the two-headed monsters at tight end and Gronkowski and Hernandez. Even on the defense, they really retooled in the draft. Everyone's raving about Chandler Jones out of Boston. So I think they'll be improved. The question is, how deep do they go in the playoffs and who do they match up with? So I think we'll agree on that right there.
Exactly. And so, what do you see, though? I talked about the Jets and maybe that whole thing being just ready to explode on them. Tim Tebow joins the Jets. Sanchez says it's fine, of course, as the starting quarterback always does whenever you bring in a backup who he may or may not think is going to take his job at some point. But I think this could get real interesting probably around week 4 or so. If the crowd starts chanting for Tebow, if Sanchez is not doing well, and plus they got a big matchup. They got the Bills this first weekend, which is another team that's kind of on the rise up, as the Jets kind of, they went 8-8 last year. And there's some stuff going on there in New York.
Yeah, it's not going to be good. And let's look at it this way. The Bills always play the Jets tough, so if they lose that game, the vultures and the New York media could be circling from week 1 on. Regardless, let's say the intended consequences happen and Tannenbaum brought in Tebow to kind of light a fire under Sanchez and run the Wildcat and get some nice PR and marketing and so forth. The fact of the matter is the Jets are brought in Tony Sperano, the man who wears sunglasses to night games, to be their offensive coordinator, and they're trying to run a ground and pound with Sean Green, who's a nice back, nothing spectacular, but everyone else in the league is passing the ball. And really the Jets have no weapons other than Santonio Holmes, who's erratic at best, and Dustin Keller, who's a tight end. So, I mean, even if all things work out and Sanchez has a great attitude adjustment, turns it around, they just don't have the weapons on offense, and the defense can only hold up so much. So I don't see it being a win-win. I also don't think this perfect scenario of Tebow complimenting Sanchez or inspiring him is going to work. And then, Rex isn't going to be able to make his proclamations. And by the end of the year, I personally feel the coaching hot seat will be focused solely on him. And it could just really turn out to be a total mess in the Meadowlands.
Yeah, it would not surprise me at all. Now, what do you see with Let's look at the Dolphins, who showed some promise there a little bit with Matt Moore starting. They won a couple of games there down the stretch, maybe coming together a little bit. 6-10 last year. Any hope for those of us who like the Dolphins from back when they went undefeated in 1972?
Hardcore, long-time fans. You know what? With a rookie quarterback, you're just going to have to be patient. If Moore started and they eased Tannehill in, I'd say, you know what? Maybe you got a shot at an 8-8, 7-9 season. But there's going to be a lot of growing pains with the young quarterback. I know they brought in his former coach from Texas A&M, Mike Sherman, to call the plays. Philbin's trying to install a new attitude and a new system there. But I preach patience to the Dolphins fans.
All right, there we go. And, had a lot of patience. It's been, I don't know, what was that last Super Bowl win back? That was a lot of years ago. Let's not even talk about it. Let's go ahead and focus on the Bills. We can focus on the Buffalo Bills. They made some good signings in the offseason, namely Mario Williams, so they're finally trying to make some moves to improve the team. 6-10 last year. Do the Bills, do they play better this year and maybe get a sniff of some postseason action?
I could see it happening. The defense has really improved. They had a good squad back there on that side of the ball, and to bring Williams in, who's ferocious on the line, I think they'll really be good there. The question is, can Ryan Fitzpatrick and Fred Jackson stay healthy?
Right.
When they were last year, they started making a little bit of a run, and then the wheels came off once both of them got out. So we'll see. We'll see if Stevie Johnson gets enough touchdowns and does his little gunslinging Plaxico Burress celebration. But you know what? They could. I really, this is a team you could see going 7-9, maybe sneaking in a 9-7, 10-6 if the chips fall right. But they're no longer a team that chalk is an automatic win if you're facing them on a weekly basis. I think there's a lot of potential there, but it's all gonna depend on how the Ivy Leaguer Fitzpatrick performs this year if he stays healthy.
Exactly, and the defensive coordinators, like I talk about, having one more season to study his tendencies and see what he does and does not like to do. How can they come back now that they're no longer a secret? So I'm with you. I take the Patriots to win this division. I don't think it's going to be, it's almost a no-brainer. No, it is a no-brainer to say they're going to win the division. The question is, how far do they go once the season is over? So let's go ahead and we'll do the same thing, and this is our final two. Not necessarily those who will match up in the AFC Championship game, but two and a dark horse. The AFC will be represented in the Super Bowl by one of what two teams?
All right, Houston Texans, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ooh.
We could see, hypothetically, a rematch of the infamous 1979 AFC Championship game with the controversial Mike Renfro play, which would have been reviewed had we had instant replay today, which is kind of one of the catalysts for turning that around. So I think somewhere Bum Phillips and Chuck Noll would like to see that.
Yeah, I think so. And, I'm going to have to go with I go with the Steelers, and just because of the way that other teams are in flux, I'm going to go with, again, I got to go with the Patriots. Steelers and Patriots to go to the one of those will go to the Super Bowl. And do you have a dark horse pick?
I'm sticking with my Kansas City Chiefs. I think if they win, maybe get a home game, who's to say they can't go down the road, maybe go into New England and sneak a win in the second round, maybe. Kind of be fitting to have a former Belichick disciple and Cornell beat him in his own building. So that's kind of my dark horse scenario right now in the AFC.
All right, so you got the Steelers or the Texans, your dark horse, the mighty Kansas City Chiefs. All right, well, my dark horse, I got to go with, and we talked about it earlier, something where it's a make or break time. And even though I didn't pick them to win the division, but I got to go with the Chargers as a dark horse to finally make it to the Super Bowl. It reaches a point where you just got to say it's make or break, not just for Norv Turner, but Phillip Rivers and his legacy and the whole team. It's just time to do it here, and I think that may be something that'll drive the Chargers through finally. So they're my dark horse pick to go to the Super Bowl this year.
You know what? On a bigger scale, it's important to the city. If the Chargers don't start turning it around, Are they going to get a new stadium? There's always a threat. There are two potential stadiums looming in LA. There's always a rumors that they'd move up there, be a natural fit. You wouldn't have to realign any of the divisions. So, it's kind of a macroeconomic and organizational theme there too. A lot's on the line this year.
Yeah, definitely. So, we're just about out of time here, but real quick, big matchup: Steelers and Broncos. Who do you like to win that game?
I'm going to go with the Steelers just for solely the revenge factor and the fact that we really don't know. I mean, Peyton showed us some flashes of his previous brilliance in the preseason, but you know what? Let's see how Tomlin and crew scheme against them on Sunday night. I'm going to go for the upset.
All right, perfect. And I'm taking the Steelers also. And next week, folks, we're going to be doing our regular weekly show, so we'll be reviewing the games of the past week and also giving you the picks for the next week. So if you're in office pools, you might want to get your pad and pencil ready for next week's show when we'll be doing our regular show and not necessarily reviewing a conference. So, Mr. Lardieri, before we sign off, anything for the fans out there? What's going on in Lardieri world?
Football Nation, I'm going to be kicking off my weekly column, which is entitled FN Follies. I've actually written two this week. One was about Tony Romo and his little commercial on how he's going to quiet the naysayers this year. And then my most recent one, which was posted Thursday evening, is called 2012 Untraditional NFL Preview. My FN Follies column takes more of a humorous look at all things football, and I kind of give you 10 predictions, some serious, like, I think the Texans could be a contender in the AFC to get to the Super Bowl, and some a little more humorous about Roger Goodell and Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. But go to footballnation.com. You can find it there. If you want to look for my archives in the top right corner, just type my name in, Chris Lardieri, and you can find all my writing there.
All right, fantastic. And then also, I'm sure that every time you write an article, you'll tweet it out at Chris L. Sports also. So follow him, everybody.
Absolutely, thanks.
All right, fantastic. Then you can follow me on Twitter at The Inside Sports. Find the website, officialinsidesports.com. So it's been a great show, so it's about time to sign off. So for Mr. Chris Lardieri, I'm Charles E. Smith, Jr. The show is Football Talk. This is an Inside Sports production. Thanks to everybody for watching, and we'll see everybody next week.